Hey, Caley, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, we're going to dive in and we're going to chat about your private practice and where you started, where you're at now, and just I know that there's going to be so many gems of wisdom in this conversation for others that are looking down that same road. So, why don't you just maybe tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your current private practice?
Sure. So my name is Caley, and I live in St. Albert. So I'm out of close to Edmonton, Alberta. Um, my current private practice is called Me to Be Pediatric Wellness Services, and I started it about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I'm a 12 to 13-year clinician, which is crazy to say. And a lot of my prior work has been in the public sector, either in with Alberta Health Services, or it was working in an education institution. So doing early education or our school age kiddos. And then I also did home care in New Zealand. So that's kind of
Oh,
my history of where I've arrived at today in private practice.
okay. So tell us a little bit about how you first started getting going. Like, when did you know that you wanted to even have your own private practice?
I think for me, the turning point was like COVID, our period of COVID,
Mm,
and that gave me time and space to be creative.
mm,
And when you're locked in your house and you have lots of time to start thinking about and reflect on next steps of where you want to go in your career, for me it started with putting my thoughts and ideas down on paper, and then it turned into actually starting a website. So that's how, for me, I just needed to get out my thoughts, and it started with creating a logo, and then what services I wanted to offer. And then I was also seeing a huge shift provincially, and there was lots of gaps in service between our community therapists and, I'm going to say, in our education
mm.
realm. And when I started thinking of my private practice, I wanted to start bringing those gaps and kind of offering something that wasn't being offered in either setting. And that's no fault of anyone. That's just sort of provincially where things were moving. So yeah, it was really the time and space to be creative during COVID that allowed me and kind of pushed me into a space of, hey, I think I want to start a private practice.
That's so wonderful. I've heard that from a number of people. I think that COVID was really the birthplace of so many businesses because, I mean, we all just paused and went, okay, wait a second. I'm not like, it's like the rat race paused and we just went, hey, what do we really want out of life? Where are we going? So that's so beautiful that you leaned into it. Did you have any fears or concerns about making that leap? What did that look like?
Oh
You
my gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. I I'm the type of person that, like, I am a deep, deep thinker and processor.
know,
So I think this idea was planted in my brain ever since I went to New Zealand. It really was a turning point in my life. But then, so I was thinking about it, and I describe myself almost that person on the fence with two legs straddled over. And there comes a point where you just lean in and take the leap. And for me, it started very small. So I started taking only a few clients on.
yeah.
And being in the public sector, it's the comforts that come with the public sector: benefits, pension, holidays. Those are beautiful things. So it's taking that leap of really, and for me, it was putting things down on paper, saying, okay, how much would I need to financially make? How much do I need to put aside for benefits, for pension? When I started putting things down on paper and seeing it very concretely, it allowed me to make that leap bit easier. I was like, oh my goodness, I can do this. This isn't
Right.
scary. Then as you start sort of building your caseload from a very small place, and through COVID, because I'm with my husband, we do our company together, so he's a behavioral consultant. We were really tapping into this niche of supporting families and kids with significant anxiety.
Oh my goodness, that's such a huge need right now. Anxiety is so on the rise in our society.
Absolutely. So, and especially through COVID, we were all
Yeah.
experiencing this collective trauma. And so that's where it started, is my husband and I wanted to really tap into this sort of holistic care for families. It's very hard to tease apart regulation and tease apart behavior. So we were going in, kind of wrapping around families, and really from the lens of like a capacity building, a coaching model, and skill building.
Oh my
And that's
gosh,
where it
it's
started.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
your clients must just love you.
And,
Like that
and
just sounds like the dream combination.
yeah, and we really, a huge gap we were noticing is we wanted to see families in their natural environments. So we were going into homes versus a clinic setting or a school setting, so that's where it started. And it started with 2 or 3 clients, 2 or 3 families. And then it just expands from there. And
That
then
was what was the tipping point? Like when were you like, okay, this side hustle that I'm running is growing and, taking life of for itself. What was that tipping point to quit your public job?
so it took a full year. So I started pulling back my time with my other employee, and I started working point 0.7. And then it was gradual, and that took about a year. And then the following year, when the school year started, again, it was a lot of self-reflection after the summer. I did a lot of private work over the summer. And I really asked myself, when I would go into a home visit, I would come out with so much joy.
Mm.
And it was that joy and that feeling that I was like, this is what I want to experience on a daily basis. And I was in a school setting, you're doing more of a consultative coaching model, where I was starting to get my hands dirty in therapy, and I was working alongside families and building skills. And for me, I was like, I want to do more of that. So it took about a year. And then at that point, I was like, I'm going to take the full leap. And I put in my request, and it's, yeah, I just envision, I'm like, and I finally jumped over the fence.
You're like, I was straddling both sides and
Yeah.
I finally jumped. That's really cool. And in there I heard that you requested a reduction in hours in your other job, which I think sometimes we're afraid of making those types of requests. Like we feel that it has to be all or nothing, and that, that potential might be there. So why not?
Yeah. And I
Why not
think
ask for it?
totally, Ashley. And I think as you build up your caseload, it was a beautiful, and I thank my previous employer endlessly. They allowed me to also have that experience of doing both. And I think as you build up your caseload, it also really built up my confidence in saying, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I still love that other job, but it was this turning point where I'm like, I was at that other employee for 10 years, and I was like, I'm ready for more. I'm ready for something different. And that's where I kind of took the leap, and it's pretty crazy. Like if I could tell any clinician, the work is out there.
Oh, yes.
It is out there. It's almost like you just have to believe. And as you work more in private practice, you find these beautiful little areas of, whether it's a gap or whether it's an interest that you want to follow, that you start, like families start reaching out, and you start also building sort of your area of specialty, and families start talking, and then they start reaching out, and it's cool. And that's evolving.
Yeah, it's that flywheel effect, right? I mean, you provide quality service and you naturally niche into what you enjoy when you're on your
Absolutely.
own. I found the exact same thing when in running my own private practice. And so then it's like you just attract more of the same of what you love, which is so beautiful. And you get to do that in private practice. You get to work in your zone of genius and in that niche that you love. You don't have to take every referral that comes your way, right?
Absolutely. And it was still really important for me. Like my husband and I had lots of conversations around um, ensuring all families can still access service. So it was really important for me in my private practice that I'm still balancing accessing, I'm going to say, publicly funded money. So I take
Right.
a lot of contracts through our provincial government with money that's provided to families, but then also private families that are looking for a very specific skill set. So for me, I'm about 50-50, and that was really important to me, to still ensure that families are having access to services.
Yeah.
And that also helped me financially really balance that if you're not getting as many private clients, you can still balance through publicly funded contracts. And those are usually 6 months to year long in length. So that also allowed me to take the leap and be like, it's okay. I still have stability to
Right.
allow me to build this other sort of part of my practice.
Well, and from a business perspective, it's so great to have multiple income streams, right? If
Absolutely.
you go all government funded or insurance based, you're relying on that funding and that insurance to be there. And if you go all private, you're also relying on that. And so to be 50-50, that's incredible. I would say that's on I don't know. I feel like in with the conversations I've had, I feel like that's more uncommon. It's not quite
Okay.
that 50-50. I feel like there's more of a swing one way or the other.
Okay. Okay.
And that's anecdotal, just like
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the conversations I've had. So, were there any resources or other mentors or people that you leaned on that helped you in that transition, or was it, yeah, what did that look like for you?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to say my greatest rock is my husband. He was so supportive. And so I think just having a really supportive partner being like, it's okay, Caley, I want you to fly.
Mm.
Financially, we're going to be okay. So that was huge. And then I am surrounded by beautiful and amazing women that are physios, psychologists, behavioral consultants that all kind of took the leap at the same time.
Oh, cool.
So they're most of my friends, we have all like my current friends, we've all met through work and they're all therapists. So a lot of us were in this position where we were thinking it and we did it all at the same time. So we were able to lean on each other. I would say my own registering body was a huge asset. I did a lot of reading. I would call them. So I would use them to understand what are the standards, what does consent need to look like. And then I started also with a lawyer and an accountant. So I think that's, if I could say anywhere to start informing yourself really well to allow yourself to proceed forward safely.
Yeah.
And all your ducks are in a row, right? So there was multiple different resources. And I'm like, when I'm a processor, I'm also like, I want everything kind of laid out systematically. The lawyer and accountant were amazing because they allow you to make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. And that was really important for me.
Yeah, I've heard that in the panel that we did in October, that advice came up from Kelly Bynes. She said that when she was starting her practice, and that was her recommendation too,
Yeah.
touch base with an accountant, and like that's just a really important asset to have at the beginning of your business. Oh, so good. So how do you get referrals? Like what how do people find you? What does that look like?
Yeah, so for me, I started with a website, and then I connected it to Google to
Mm,
make sure. So that was really important. So, and then I started looking at all the different social media streams, such as Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So I would say, and then word of mouth. So a lot of my referrals come through, I would say, actually a Google search.
okay.
Um, yeah, and then I would say a lot. The second would be word of mouth, and third would be um, previously when you work somewhere for 10 years, you're highly connected within that community.
Mm,
And I have amazing colleagues that share, check out this OT. Um, Also, when you are surrounded by different therapists that are PTs, psychologists, we all kind of work together to say, hey, I obviously we give ample choices, but we
yeah.
can say, yeah, here's someone who is a psychologist in your area. Here's a few people. So we all, instead of looking at each other as competition, we really say who has the best skill set, who services this area, and we support each other. So that's a pretty cool way of getting referrals as well. It's just, yeah.
That, and I think that speaks to that abundance mindset, right? That when you know there are people out there who are ready for your services, and you're going to support them the best that you can, whether that's you fulfilling that service or one of your colleagues fulfilling that service. It cycles. Like it comes back to you.
Absolutely. And I really feel like, for example, like I'm quite far north. So when I get clients from the south side of the city, I will often say, here's a variety of OTs that are closer to you. They have a
Yeah.
clinic. And I think that's one thing we have to look at is ultimately, I want clients and families getting service. I look at it as karma. It all comes
Yep.
back. So if you're putting that good energy out saying these are other individuals who can service your family, that's ultimately the end goal. That also comes back.
Oh, I'm so the same way. I service families both in, like, I live in Vernon and then in Kelowna, but it's like an hour distance. And so, I mean, there was a time I used to travel. I used to have most of my business in Kelowna, and now I'm pulling it back. And I just, again and again, it's just that abundance, right? I now have a colleague in Kelowna where if he gets a referral here, he's like, hey, why don't you just take that? I'm like, oh, yeah, and here's this Kelowna referral. Like, let's just stay where we are. There's no need for us both to be traveling back and forth.
Absolutely.
There's more than enough people that need support and services. And I do think that that offers better quality for people, right? When they don't have to travel so far, like there's less of a burden on their family or less of a burden on you as a professional. It just, overall, I think it serves everybody better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So being a really, wanted to have your ducks in a row, were you a person that wrote up a business plan before you took that full leap?
You know what? That's a good question. I did not write up a business plan. I would say, or I guess not a strategic plan. I
Okay.
wrote up a plan around my husband and I sat down. We reviewed our mission, our vision, our sort of philosophy and framework of care. And then our sort of, I'm going to say, workflow and some of those things. But like a strategic plan, we have not.
Well, and a business plan isn't, I mean, I guess it's a little more just around the structure of it, right?
The
It's that
structure.
vision, that
Yeah.
mission, that, how are you going to serve people?
Yeah.
And
So I
so,
would say,
yeah,
yes, I guess we did, Ashley. Like um, because as you're building your website, you're naturally thinking about all of those things.
true.
So we, some like key things we really knew is we wanted to weave together sort of my husband's skill set of mental health and trauma, and then sort of my skill set of regulation, sensory, developmental milestones, and weave that together in a very holistic approach. So, and then we found a framework that sort of worked for us. So yeah, I guess we inadvertently kind of did as we built our website, but I wouldn't say it's like down on paper, super concrete, but yeah.
No, and I bring it up in conversations because I think we can put stumbling blocks in front of us and we can think, oh, I need to have a website and I need to have a business plan and I need to have all these things all sequenced out before I can take that leap. But what I find is most people, they have it in some version or another.
I would agree.
Right? But it's not necessarily that methodical, and that's okay. You will get there eventually. And if you were to go back, you'd be like, oh yeah, I can fill in all those questions on a business plan, no problem.
Yep.
But don't let that be a stop point for you in taking that leap.
100%. And I think for a lot of people, it's probably up in here, and you kind of have your process and your framework. And it's, yeah, for us, we just knew as we built our website, it kind of was just coming out. So yes, do not let that be a barrier, because it all comes.
Yeah.
It all comes after, and especially after you're doing it for a year or two, you continue to shift things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. As a recovering perfectionist, I feel like so many of us can really relate to that. I've definitely learned that however I start, it's going to change.
Absolutely.
Right? And it will evolve. So don't even try to get it perfect. Just start, and it will evolve, and it will become more clear, and it will become more systematized and organized as you get into it. And so don't wait for it to be perfect, because it always is evolving, right? Businesses are evolving.
And that's also, I think, how we practice as OTs. That's this, like, reflective process, right? And I think don't be scared to also ask families, even whether it's at the end of like discharge or end of a visit, saying, how was this? Like, what was your experience? Can I make something easier? Because I think we have to also align things for our clients. So even intake, like, I'll ask for feedback, and I think
I have a question about that.
Yeah, don't be scared of feedback.
Now, where did you come to that? Are you someone who like what's your personal, if you're okay to share, like, what's on the personal development side for you? Because I have worked with some clinicians where I was like, I don't actually know that you could handle private practice because you really struggle with feedback. And when you're in private practice, one of the shifts that happens is you go from just being the clinician to you're the business owner. And so you do need to be able to take feedback on the process. You do need to be able to take the positive and the negative, because there's no manager above you to be like, oh, go complain to him. Like, it's you. So what would you say allows you to be open and receptive to that?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question, Ashley. I think that's just naturally who I am a little bit. Okay. Like, if I were to put something, like, tag it on to, like, I don't know, a framework, or like motivational interviewing, I think is a beautiful way. I think all clinicians should, it allows you to have those open conversations. And especially when you move into private practice, like, so that's, I both my husband and I have taken motivational interviewing, which is a powerful tool. I think it's also modeling and demonstrating an open and kind and clear conversations between a therapist and a family. So if I'm going to model that, part of that is receiving feedback.
Yep.
And I'm not scared to have hard conversations. And I think I look at it as a gift when families give me feedback. It's like, thank you. Like, I look at, they felt comfortable enough sharing it.
Yep.
And they feel comfortable enough that thinking that some change could come from it as well. So I think as clinicians, don't be scared to have those tough conversations and to receive that feedback, because it really allows you to shift and be reflective and meet also clients where they're at. So
And
I
that's
fair.
yeah, that's awesome. Would you say that having those skills are a prerequisite or maybe just an asset in running your own private practice?
I'm going to say an asset.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I wouldn't say prerequisite, but I think when you move into private practice, and my gosh, this has been a shift, even from I think where I started like a year and a half ago. You have to be okay that you may not be aligned with everyone that comes in as a referral. And I always kind of think of myself, I put myself in the client's shoes and say, okay, if I walked into a physiotherapist's office and maybe they weren't able to service a particular injury, I would find another therapist that is more specialized in that. So I continue to remind myself of, it's okay if a family wants to move on and I'm not the right therapist. That's been a huge adjustment though. Like you have to kind of sit in a space of like, it's okay. I'm not going to be everyone's favorite therapist. I'm not going to be the right therapist for everyone. I may not have the certain skills that they're looking for. And it's letting that go.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of saying, it's okay. It's okay. Because ultimately, it's about the family and client getting service.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I so feel the same way. And I've been in the position where people have given me that feedback and walked away. And it sometimes takes everything to remind yourself, this isn't about me and everything about who I am. This is about them and what they need. And it's bless and release, right? Thank you for the time that we did have together. Thank you for having a strong enough voice to know that this isn't working, and bless and release, right? Allow them to.
Totally. It's not easy, you guys, but
it's not. And I mean, the first couple families that dumped me, so to speak, it hit hard. And then you learn. And then, the next time it happens, you're like, right, okay, this is part of doing business. It works for some people. And that's also the beauty of private practice. Just like you said, is that people can find somebody that fits with them. And I think that fit, especially in the type of work that you're doing, it's so vulnerable for the clients that you're working with, right? Like you're in their homes, you're having these really vulnerable and intimate conversations, and you're providing this beautiful support. They get that privilege of then also saying yes or no, this is working or isn't working for me.
And for me, one of the hardest things for me, and I had to really work at, anytime it came to talking about money, that was so hard. So what I realized is the more transparent you are about how you bill, how much things are, how you bill indirect time versus direct time initially, even though it's a hard conversation, I wasn't comfortable with it, the easier it is to often move forward. So, and you're kind of preventing this astonishment all of a sudden and some of those hard conversations. So that's something I had to work on, is being super clear at the front, saying, this is how much time this may take, or this is, I have some direct time with you, but there's also going to be some indirect, and this is what you're going to come out of this indirect time, whether that's resources or if I've done an assessment, you're going to come out with a summary. The clearer you are up front, I think families actually appreciate that. I've
agreed. Absolutely.
Right. And it's not easy. I'm going to say that was a massive shift for me, going from a public to a private sector, and that's something that is sort of transformed over a year and a half, is being super crystal clear around how you bill and the time in front of a family. So
I think the other part of that is and being unapologetic about it.
Yes. Oh my
right?
God.
Yep. This is what it costs. this is what I'm offering, this is the value, and having that confidence to say yes. And if that doesn't align with you, then there are other services available. That took
Absolutely.
me some time as
Oh my
well.
gosh.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it's a
And
process. It's a process.
absolutely. And it comes from the space too where when you come from a salary position, you
Hmm.
don't think about how an hour of your time equates to this
Yep.
amount. That was a huge shift for me, a huge shift, and it was hard. So I think it's also recognizing the value that you're bringing as an occupational therapist to a family, knowing your worth. And I, my husband and friends also continue to remind me that hour of time you're giving to a family is an hour of time you're either not giving to yourself or your own family. So it is worth something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really acknowledging and sitting in a space of if you're giving that, there is a monetary value attached to it. And that was a really hard shift.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad we had that conversation because money is uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable.
Often, right?
Oh my gosh.
We often don't want to talk about it. And I know I've done a lot in terms of my own money mindset and I don't, it's just, I think it's coming back to there's enough work to go around. It's not about me. We're serving our clients and just being, unapologetic and clear as kind and having everything up front. But it takes, I'm sure I can hear it in the conversation. When you step out on your own in private practice, it's a bit of a refinement of self.
Mhm.
It's
Absolutely.
you because again, you don't have that manager above you. You're now handling multiple pieces of the business. It is a
Yeah.
little bit more personal. You're a little more personally connected to it.
Yeah.
And you have to be open to, I guess you don't have to be, that's a strong word.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
That's true.
will it will probably serve you better if you are open to that process and open to the learning that's in front of you that's part of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I really think it's one of life's great ways of I see so much personal development in myself in being an entrepreneur. It's like this other personal development stream compared
Oh
to,
my
I don't know,
gosh.
other things you might do, right?
Yes. And it's okay because it's not for everyone too. Like,
Yeah.
and it even like I've had some friends where they've done private practice and they shift back to salary and public, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So I think don't let fear be your barrier. I
Yeah.
think try it. If you want to try it, go for it. And it doesn't have to mean you stay there forever
Yeah.
either, right? You can always shift back if you need to. So, or want to,
Yeah.
or if it suits your life better. So that's something too. I kind of have to again sit in of like, okay, if I don't like it, I have 12 years of practice behind me. I will find another job, right? Like,
Probably pretty easily.
yeah. So it's that reminder too, like, I will be okay. I
Yeah.
will be okay.
Absolutely. So we were talking before we got into that conversation, we were talking a bit about systems,
Mhm.
getting your system set up, like figuring out how you were going to offer your services. So tell me a little bit more about that development as you started to dig into the business pieces. What were some of the systems that you put in place? At what point, you already talked about having an accountant. Are there any other people that you hired or um, systems you purchased? What did that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So again, I sound very type A and perfectionist. So I started with
You're
research.
not alone. You are not alone.
I started with research. So I started with CAOT. And this is how I stumbled across Therabyte is there was a list of, I think they were like client software. And it was there was, I think, 4 other sort of providers and yourself. And I just started working through them. And I knew for me, I love technology. I love having, when I started looking through ACOT, so that's our registering body, one of the primary things they talked about was confidentiality and making sure all your, as you start documenting, and like I started initially with a few paper files, and then I quickly was like, no, I do not want to do this. I do not want to have files. So I knew I wanted to quickly switch over to tech and have a place where I could house documents that were safe and also on Canadian soil, because that was something else that was outlined.
And how quickly was that? Like you said, you had a couple paper files. Would you say
within a month?
Okay, like really quick,
really quick.
Okay.
Yeah. I did a few clients on paper files, and I knew immediately. I'm like, no, this is not. And I'm like, there has to be something. I knew a few of my physio buddies use Jane, and so I started exploring, and I reached out to a bunch of different client software, and I did their trials. So I would do like a week-long trial, and then I would always make sure I connected with someone, either via Zoom or a phone call. So, and I was like, tell me about your system. Tell me who it's usually used by, how you utilize it. And I was also using QuickBooks too. So I had all these different parts all over. Like I was using Google, a paper file, QuickBooks, and I was like, all right, there has to be something that smushes this all together. So I started looking, and then I pretty quickly, within a month, stumbled upon you guys and Therabyte, and I loved it. I was hooked.
So what I hear people going through this journey and quickly getting overwhelmed. There's too many options. They're also different. I don't know which is going to be the right one for me. What stood out for you with Therabyte? Because you also mentioned Jane, that you had, trialed Jane. And so what made it stand out? What made it feel like a fit for you?
Great question, actually. So I tried Owl and I tried Jane, and I feel like there was one other one. So for me, what stood out, to be quite honest, is that it was built by an OT and it was built for OTs and SLPs. So the type of work that I do, and even the contracts that I do, that's what stood out for me right away, is how I could almost see how your brain worked in the honestly, and I'm like, whoa, this is exactly how my brain works. So even with Jane, I found it very physio oriented. Owl was very psychology oriented. So I was like, these aren't quite fitting it. Like they had aspects of what I was looking for, but not everything. So I would say, I'm trying to think of some standout things. It was being able to do contracts was the one thing, and being able to see how many hours and money is used throughout, because that's 50% of my work. So I needed something that encompassed that. Visually, I'm going to say I'm a very visual person. So I needed something that was visually very easy to use for me. And also was kind on the eyes. So I found Therabyte is very kind on the eyes. When you open it up, it's very user-friendly. It's very easy to navigate. Even the little things of being able to put your picture, with my husband and I doing a lot of joint work, it was so nice to be like, oh, Alex's picture is there and Caley's picture. We were on the same client. That was so silly, but it was a very quick reference of here's all my clients, here's our joint clients. So that was, and then the scheduler was something I absolutely loved, again, visually, to be able to, because I tried navigating through some of the other schedulers and they just weren't as, I'm going to say, user-friendly or visually kind to the eyes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So I just, for me and how my brain works, it was very easy and quick. And I was like, yeah, I like this. And I just knew right away.
Well, I love how you pointed out the way the other ones felt to you. And I often have this conversation with people that, as much as we would all love for there to be one ultimate, the best ever, and everyone should just use this one. We all have a slightly different way of thinking.
Totally.
And so, yeah, Owl was built for psychologists, and Jane was kind of more that physio chiro
Yeah.
massage clinic. And so they come from the thought process is different. And that's really cool that you can see that and feel that. And that's, I mean, as a company, that's where we're coming from. We want people to feel like, yes, this makes sense to my brain. This works, this flows.
And you have to think about too, like, how are you going to utilize this within your clinic, and
Exactly.
on a day-to-day basis. So it has to feel not taxing on your brain. And immediately that's what I felt with Therabyte is I'm like, this is super easy to use. I can be sitting in front of a client, pulling up their file, typing it in. Where the other ones, I was just feeling a little bit of resistance. I was like, oh, this is hard to navigate or get to that next step. So like you said, Ashley, for me and our clinic, or I'm going to say our private practice, it works beautifully. But I think everyone needs to try a few and do that week-long trial. And also, I think I had the opportunity to talk to both yourself and Mike. That's also what sold it to me. It was that personal connection saying, okay, walk me through this. You guys were able to answer questions, because where you may start with your private practice is not necessarily where you end. So you have to walk through those different scenarios saying, okay, as I get bigger, what's your capacity to look at things like this? And I wouldn't have known any of those things unless you have that sort of one-on-one conversation. And that's where really you guys were able to walk through, okay, this feature is coming. We've considered this. And that was really important. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So you're using QuickBooks, you're using paper, everything was kind of all over the place. You went through your trials. What did that transformation look like for you when you then made the switch? How did that impact your work?
Oh goodness. Okay. So I would say immediately I was able to get rid of QuickBooks, for the most part.
Yep.
Yeah. So because I was really only using QuickBooks in the capacity of invoicing. So I still do have QuickBooks for some things, but my invoicing immediately changed over to Therabyte. And I love that you could do invoicing and send it off to families really quickly. So that was a quick change. The scheduler was immediately a game changer. So previously I had it in my personal phone and my Google, and nothing was crossing over. So to know that it's I put it into the scheduler, I would do my plan, and then you could then go back, write everything up after a visit and invoice. That whole sort of process, that changed pretty quickly. Everything paper-wise quickly changed over to tech. So I no longer have paper files, and that that changed within a month, because in my head I was like, okay, in 25 years, let's say I keep doing this, do I want my whole basement to be full of paper files? And is that even safe? How do I lock my files up? So I was already thinking ahead, being like, how am I going to do this? And I just saw it as an investment, let's get ahead of this.
Yeah.
Before we get to a place of now I have 100 clients and now I'm having to scan everything in. So I was like, this is 100% worth the money and time to start from the beginning. So it was pretty quick, and I just started using it. And even if I was like, I don't even know quite what I'm doing, but I'm just going to try it.
Yeah. Well, I think you grow into it like any system, and just like a business, you get into it. There's certain features or certain aspects you start using right away. And then
Totally,
and then you evolve. Are there any features that you weren't using at the beginning that maybe you're now using and enjoying now?
Mm-hmm. So I am now I've gotten to a place where I've fixed up the landing page in order to have clients actually book appointments. So previously I was doing this all through email, and now I've just gotten way too big and busy. And that was releasing a sense of control and kind of being like, okay, my clients can navigate the client portal. We can, so now I'm doing all my documentation on Therabyte. I'm starting to utilize the bookings, which has been so nice where like I open up on my calendar, I'm like, oh, there's a tentative booking. I can say yes or no. That's been a game changer. So that took me a year and a half to get to a place of like,
well, I think you're ahead of most of us. Being these A-type personalities, we're like, I control my schedule. Nobody else can touch it. So kudos to you. Give yourself a pat on the back. I think you got there several years sooner than
all right
than most practitioners in private practice. We're all like, I got to control it.
Yeah, totally. But as soon as I did that the amount of time that you spend going back and forth over email with a family being like, this day doesn't work. Now I'm just like, and again, it's about transparency. When I do an intake with a family, I'm like, you will receive an email from Therabyte. They're my client software system. I outline everything is confidential. I do all my documentation and appointment bookings, and families are like, oh, okay. And because I see it now shifting, like even when I go to my doctor's office, they're using something very similar. Yeah. My physio office, they may be using Jane or something very similar. So I think there's this natural shift I'm seeing with a lot of medical professionals now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to come to the point where when you're looking for a medical professional, if you can't book online, you're probably actually not going to book with them. That's where I think the shift is going, because it's like 8:00 at night. Oh, right. I needed to book with Caley. Well, now I can get online. And if they can't, maybe they go somewhere else. That's where things are shifting for sure. And now you said in doing that online booking, we have the capacity to do it just for current clients or for new clients. How do you have it set up? Is it just your current clients that are able to book online, or anybody?
Oh my gosh, you're going to have to show me that feature. Okay. Right now, I think I have it for both, but I would be, now that's a question. I'm like,
okay, well, I'll have to check. I was like, that's newer, but I think again, with that control piece, with the practitioners that we're serving, we saw people were like, okay, I'm okay with my current clients booking themselves in, but not so much new people, because I want to screen them and know about them before they book in. Now, are you utilizing the client portal more than with your clients, and are you seeing a positive reaction in terms of sharing of information? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say still my natural workflow is I always do a telephone intake to sort of screen a client. And I think it's really important to just touch base with a client. After that, I will send them my intake through Therabyte. So that's been beautiful, where I'm still figuring out my waiver forms and things like that are still, I like families to actually sign off. And then I upload that into Therabyte. So that's something I still need to shift to, is now putting it into Therabyte and sending it out that way. Mm-hmm. So that's something. And then I'm just trying to think of my workflow. And then now documentation has been beautiful. And I just send all my documentation and just share pieces of their homework or resources. Mm-hmm. That has been a game changer. That I love, and families have been super receptive to that. And then sometimes what I'll do is when I go back to a family's house, I'll just do a quick peruse, being like, did you receive this? Let's just quickly go through this together, just to do a quick check-in, because sometimes you may not toggle something may not be shared. And that's been really nice too. And I've asked families, I'm like, how is this easy to use? Can you get into all the resources? And I've had really great feedback with it. So
Beautiful. I think that's the other shift, where as a society, we're going to have that expectation of online booking. We're also going to have that expectation of, I want access to my notes. I want access to what's going on. And I think as, the one receiving the service, absolutely. I mean, they have the right to that information. And when we can, again, be transparent in this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm documenting, and then it creates more trust within that client relationship.
Absolutely, Ashley. And I think you do have to be quite cognizant of how you're writing notes too, knowing that if you're sharing your entire note with a family, you're writing it in a way that can be received not with medical jargon or I'm going to say a strength-based approach, that they're going to receive it in a way that they're like, oh, okay, this feels good. So that's been a shift too, is just even how you document. You have to be really attuned to who the audience is.
I completely agree. I used to do my chart note and then I would write an email, and they were separate. So it would take me twice the amount of time because I was doing more like my medical note, and then I would write it the same thing, but more friendly to the family.
Yeah.
I've now seen that transition in my charting where it's like, nope, I sharing is caring. That's my personal philosophy for my private practice. I would say I probably share like 90% of my notes with clients because I just and the whole note, but it's because I've shifted my documentation to be clients, like it's for them. The record is for them. And so when I'm writing it to them. And, if I can't take the time to do that, then maybe I just share a portion, and there are times where I have a conversation with somebody else and I might not be sharing that piece of it. But for the most part, it has definitely shifted how I document because it is about the client. It's, hey, this is for you. This session was for you. This documentation is for you. I mean, who else is going to look at it, right?
Absolutely. And that's a skill in itself. Like that takes a little bit of a shift in how we're documenting and communicating, right?
It does. You'd probably laugh. And maybe you're the same way, but I've gotten anal about like bolding and, headers and chunking things up into different.
Oh my gosh.
So it's more readable for people. And I had a EA working with me for a little bit, and her documentation was just like just straight. And I was like, nobody can read that. Like, you've got to break it up a little bit. And
totally.
You're right. It is a skill to how you're communicating that.
Is it visually pleasing? Like I look at, if you were to look at it, can you follow it quite easily? That's taken me some time and I'm still working on that. It does not come naturally. So that's been great. And I'm slowly moving everything over to doing everything on Therabyte. But again, that's taken me about 1.5 years to do.
I think it's just that adoption piece, there's always new things to learn and know, because your systems are always iterating as your business grows. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We're into rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Ready.
Okay. What do you love most about private practice?
Hands-on.
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 What would you say is the biggest thing Therabyte has brought to your practice, or your favorite feature?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Is it fair to say almost like a workflow, an easy workflow?
Yeah. That's not one feature. It's like all of them, but
I know.
I was like, we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
If you could give yourself one piece of advice back like 1.5 years ago, what would it be?
You are capable of doing this.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, Caley, thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been really beautiful to know you better, to know more about your business and the beautiful things that you're doing in your community up there in St. Albert. The people there are lucky to have you.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Yes, you as well. Bye now.